This is the Royal Report.
Good evening, welcome to the Royal Report. I'm Caroline DeRusso, and here's what we have for you tonight on the show. Harry and Meghan's pretend royal tour in Nigeria has eyes rolling. We'll tell you how that all played out. Harry travelled to London for an Invictus Games service. Who was in attendance, or rather, who wasn't? We'll dive into that one shortly. And King Charles was too busy to see Prince Harry during his trip. But some are saying that isn't the full story. Esther Krakue joins us from London with the details. But before we get to that, we know Harry arrived in London this week for an Invictus Games event. Meghan then met him in London before they jetted down to Nigeria on tour. Here's a snapshot.
The Harry and Meghan show back on the road. Arriving in Nigeria with hugs and handshakes, the Sussexes headed straight to school. It's not a royal tour, they're not working royals, but this visit looks and feels like one. It's been a while since we saw the Sussexes together and overseas. Harry and Meghan starting with a mental health summit.
And the more you talk about it, the more you can kick stigma away, far, far away, into the long grass.
Harry will spend time in Nigeria promoting Invictus. For Meghan, who has Nigerian heritage, it's more personal, but both keen to be seen and doing their thing their way.
No doubt it's great to see them out and about and trying to make a positive impact. I have no doubt of their good intentions so far as that is concerned. But like the video said, it looked an awful lot like a royal tour. This also didn't escape the attention of Vogue, or Tatler, or the Daily Telegraph. It's the royal tour which isn't the royal tour, or as entertainment reporter Peter Ford described it, the Audi version of a royal tour. Sad. And this is the point. If you don't want to be a royal, that's totally fine. Go live whatever alternative life is your preference. But go easy on the use of your titles, regal insignia, demanding your children be granted their birthright titles, demanding taxpayer-funded security, and trotting around the planet cosplaying royal tours. If you don't want to be a royal and you don't want the duty and responsibility that goes with it, then please spare us all the performance art. Joining me now is News Corp columnist Louise Roberts and royal commentator Angela Mollard. Angela, Harry appears to have been well received back in London. He seemed pretty happy to be there.
Yeah, that's really surprised me because the optics on it, if you look at it initially, the King doesn't meet up with him. No members of the royal family actually attended the Invictus Games ceremony. Obviously, no meeting with William. But behind the scenes, actually, it was a really good visit for Harry. He had 3 days in London. The Invictus ceremony was well received. He was really surprised to find that people were lining the streets and wanted to meet with him. The Spencer family, his late mother's brother and sister, both attended. People like the actor Damian Lewis were there at the service. He read the Invictus poem. And there was a feeling that Harry was back to doing some of the things that we know him to be. He was leading with his heart rather than that hot-headedness we've seen for the last few years. So I think it was an unexpectedly successful visit.
I totally agree. And Louise, you know, lots of speculation about the royal family and what they would or wouldn't do. How did it all play out in the end?
Well, as it turned out, none of the royal family were at the Invictus event at St Paul's Cathedral. However, several of them, including Charles, Camilla, Prince Edward, Sophie and Princess Anne, were in fact at a garden party at Buckingham Palace some 3 kilometres away on the same day at the same time. So obviously there's a bit of a diary issue there, and it does make you wonder why Charles is so cautious about meeting up with his youngest son while he's back in the UK. Of course, he saw him in February when he came back after the announcement of Charles's cancer diagnosis. So it was very interesting to see 2 worlds apart. And I really feel now we're at the point with Harry that either Harry is at an event or the rest of the royal family are at a different event, that there's not going to be a lot of cross-pollination going on there. And he saw his extended family on his mother's side, of course, Lady Jane Fellows and Earl Spencer. But as for his brother and Kate Middleton, they were nowhere to be seen at either Invictus or at the garden party.
To be fair, though, the garden party would have been planned long in advance. So if the rest of the family were already attending that event at the same time, that there I can sort of understand. Now, Angela, we know there's an ongoing tiff, misunderstanding, whatever you want to call it, between the Sussexes and the Beckhams. But eyebrows were raised this week when Charles appeared to find time for the Beckhams, but not Harry.
This is really interesting because this was clearly not announced. The Beckhams and the Palace didn't announce it. It's been somebody's leaked it to the Times and it's subsequently been followed up everywhere else. So this was a private meeting on Friday, which was the morning that Harry left London. David Beckham is apparently very interested in the King's Foundation, that charitable foundation of the Kings. But I think this is really interesting because if you remember, David Beckham is very old school royals. He queued for 13 hours when the Queen died to be able to pay his respects. We also know that there's no longer any love between the Beckhams and the Sussexes, despite the fact that the Beckhams were invited to the Sussexes' wedding. Subsequent to that, we know the Sussexes have accused the Beckhams of leaking stories to the press. Meghan was apparently not particularly happy that the Beckhams were very good friends with William. So that splinter there, but it won't have felt comfortable for Harry knowing that his father had time for the former English football captain, but not for his son.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, Harry and Meghan, they gave a speech while they were in Nigeria, which is where they went to, obviously, after London. And it was on the subject of mental illness and mental health. Here is a snippet of what they had to say.
It is fantastic to be here in Nigeria with you all and to be here at the school for our first visit. Hi.
But as I look around this room, I see myself in all of you as well.
If you take anything away from today, just know that mental health affects every single person.
Louise, there was also an interesting report this week that apparently the Sussexes want to generate positive stories. While what they had to say in Nigeria was very good, I struggle to reconcile what they say with what they do.
Well, absolutely, I agree with you 100%, Caro. The thing is, they get very frustrated, Harry and Meghan, when they cannot control the narrative or the PR around them. They go into Nigeria is a bit of a safe space. Obviously, there's the ancestry on Meghan's side, but also they can do that sort of mock royal tour, as we spoke about earlier, and they can make their points via their speeches and know that, you know, they're not going to be castigated or mocked too much in that environment for being sort of, you know, pseudo-royal, as it were, without all the trimmings. So, look, and Harry did make some excellent points, I think, about mental health, about it's not okay to criticise people who've got mental health issues, and it's okay to not be okay in a way. And also, you know, there is still a stigma attached to mental health because it's an illness seen on the inside and not really that transparent to a lot of people. So it would be great to see them do more sort of positive advocacy in this way instead of that sort of scorched earth technique they've had previously when they've sort of relied on Oprah and, you know, their version of the truth to sort of get their message across. But again, they're not working royals, so I think they have to be very careful in the path they take.
And Angela, speaking of getting their message across, we hear another documentary is potentially on the cards.
Yes, we do, but I don't think they'll be getting their message across in this one because I don't think they're obliging and being helpful with this one. This is a German production company who is doing a documentary on their life effectively post-Megxit. So they're going to be talking to people in Montecito, talking to people that the couple have worked with over the last few years. Now, this should be really interesting because we've heard a lot from Harry and Meghan, but we haven't heard about their new life. And the way they operate is really interesting. Tina Brown's seminal book called The Palace Papers took a really good deep dive into Meghan's life in Canada before she met Harry. So I think if these documentary writers, program makers are rigorous, we could get some really good details behind the scenes, the story that they're not prepared to tell us about how they interact with people, how the jam business is going, you know, what it's like being at school with their kids, that sort of thing, which I'd be fascinated to watch, frankly.
I think we all will be, frankly. Now, back to the family in the UK, and Princess Katherine continues her recovery. We aren't getting much detail, but people on the ground are still interested in how she's going. Now, William was asked about her health this week while he was in Cornwall. Here it is.
May I ask how Princess Kate is doing?
She's doing well, thank you.
Lovely, and the children as well.
The children are very jealous that I'm here. Oh. And they're not here as well.
Louise, thankfully the spotlight largely has come off Katherine as she recovers. But what's the latest on her recovery and return that we know? And obviously in the meantime, William and Camilla continue to carry on with all those official duties.
They are. They're sort of forging ahead, really. And as far as Katherine's health is concerned, I mean, really, it's what William says. She's doing well. They'll be very specific about the detail they release around her convalescence in order to give her that privacy that obviously she needs to get better and to get back onto the royal system, as it were, in a way. And of course, you know, William and Camilla have been out doing their royal duties, and the fact that William spent the night overnight in Cornwall, which is some 6 or 7 hours drive from London, would suggest that in fact Katherine is on the mend. The fact that he was happy to spend a night away from her and carry out his royal duties. He was down in Cornwall, he was visiting surf lifesavers, he was at the Isles of Scilly. He was playing volleyball on the beach, which was great to see. So, and of course, everyone was delighted to see him. Camilla, meantime, has been going around the country launching these coronation libraries, which is where a lot of books are donated to specific schools to encourage a love of reading amongst kids. And we know from her sort of literary sort of skills that she loves the ideas of books and book clubs, and she's got her own podcast, which is, you know, fantastically successful, unlike Meghan's, of course. So it was great to see her out there sort of spreading the power of reading and education to young children. It's taking the spotlight off Katherine so she can recover at home.
And Angela, it's great to see Charles back at public duties. He really seems to be enjoying himself and he seems to be balancing things quite well.
Yeah, I tell you who won't be enjoying it is the person who keeps his diary, because what Charles is doing is he's suddenly going, I want to go to this thing. So he went to the School of Military Engineering. He gave them 8 days notice. Now, 8 days is nothing. He suddenly saw he had a gap in his diary. It was in Wiltshire, close to his home. And apparently he just sort of announced that he wanted to go along to see these people. They had to obviously get everything ready. I mean, they say, the royal family, that the smell that they know is the smell of fresh paint, because everywhere that they go, people have repainted. Well, you don't get a chance to repaint in 8 days. So I think the guy or the woman who's looking after Charles's diary will be having a hard time at the moment. He did say when he got there that he was very grateful to be let out of his cage. So, you know, it's only less than a year since the coronation. He actually wants to be king. He waited a long time for it. So he obviously wants to get back into the role that he's waited his whole life for.
And staying with you, Angela, look, we know royal warrants are big business and the royal family has withdrawn 2 of them. Why is that?
Yeah, this is really interesting. Kimberly-Clark and Samsung, this is because of their connections with the Russians. So the Ukrainians wrote to the palace and said, look, we don't want you supporting with royal warrants when companies that are, as they see it, sponsors of war. This is really interesting. A royal warrant is basically a stamp of approval from the royal family. It means the company can use the royal arms on their packaging and in their marketing. And some companies, for instance, like Cadbury, have had them since the mid-1800s. But any companies that are currently still operating, still serving Russia, will be coming under question. There's 800 of them, and the king is going through them one by one and declaring whether or not they will retain their royal warrants. So I think we'll see a lot more go by the wayside in the months to come.
He might be going through them one by one, but Louise, despite a high-profile mishap, one company has managed to retain theirs. Who was it?
That's right. So Parker Pens, you may remember a couple of years ago at Hillsborough Castle in Belfast, the King was signing a document. It was just after 6 days of mourning, of course, after the death of his mother. And the pen leaked all over his hands and he got very exasperated and suggested that this is the type of pen that always leaked, and he sort of walked off or stormed off, depending on how you want to see it. And then there was this great image of Camilla sort of looking at the offending pen, wondering why it was leaking everywhere. However, clearly Charles does not hold a grudge, at least when it comes to stationery, because he has renewed the Parker Pen Royal Warrant, which is fantastic because they're a brilliant English company, long-serving to the royal family. In fact, his mother used a Parker pen all the way through her reign, and I think her mother used the Parker pens as well. So if they were to lose their royal warrant just because of a mishap of spilt ink, that would be a real shame.
Good to see he's a forgiving man. Now, this week in The Telegraph, Hannah Furness details a week in the life of Princess Anne. We know Princess Anne is a very hard-working woman and the breadth of her engagements, to be honest, is quite fascinating. Louise, still with you, it's great to see it documented in such detail, isn't it? I've got about a minute for you.
It is. I mean, we've often spoken about how much we love Princess Anne and her no-fuss, hard-working attitude. I mean, we're talking about meeting 650 people in the space of that time. So that's 650 hands she would have shaken. Endless conversations, hardly any probably tea or coffee or anything like that. Anytime she had an hour and a half, another event or meeting would be sort of crowbarred into that time as well. She researches every event she goes to. All her questions are precise. Everyone is made to feel that they are the centre of her world when she meets them. But there's no fawning. It's all very organised, and people feel that they can make an application to her office to meet her and she will oblige. So to see the hard work and detail in Hannah's story, and Hannah's been a royal correspondent for I think nearly 10 years, and even she was flabbergasted by the speed that this 73-year-old legend of the royal family can motor through the week. Incredible.
I love that. Fabulous, fabulous. Louise, Roberts, Angela Mollard, thank you so much for joining us. Now, coming up, King Charles was apparently too busy to meet Harry in London, but some are saying that this isn't the full story. Esther Krakue joins us from London next. Welcome back to the show. Joining me now is writer and broadcaster Esther Krakue. Esther, there's always so much speculation around Harry when he visits the UK. Tell us about this Invictus Games event and who from the royal family attended.
So Harry came to the UK for the Invictus Games 10th anniversary, and he made it clear that through his press team that he wasn't able to meet the King because of the King's schedule. He did extend invitations to other members of the royal family, including his brother and his sister-in-law, all of whom did not attend because they had other engagements. Obviously, in the case of Princess Katherine, she hasn't been engaging in any sort of public appearances because of her cancer treatment. Now, the press are dubbing this incident as a snub from King Charles for not making room in his diary. But that's not really the entirety of the story. We do know that the King is still undergoing cancer treatment, and he's slowly being eased back into royal duties after what he described as, being released from his cage. In his first year of being king, something he's waited for his entire life, he's been diagnosed with cancer, and I'm sure that's something that he's really distraught about, not least because he doesn't feel like he can give his all to a role that he's waited for all his life. I do find it curious that this information about Harry not being able to meet his father came from Prince Harry's PR team. It's actually quite consistent with what we've seen with the Sussexes over the last few years. Every sort of kind of briefing about the Sussexes and the royal family, whether they're being able to meet or coming to certain engagements or the King's coronation or anything like that, has come from the Sussexes team. And this is one of the reasons why you can see that there's not a lot of trust between the royal family and the Sussexes. They are the ones that have briefed the press on virtually everything. The royal family have made a point of staying mute on anything to do with Harry and Meghan. They have not briefed in private or publicly about anything to do with the Sussexes. They made it very clear that there's a clear line between them and Harry and Meghan. And you can see why, particularly Prince William wouldn't want Harry and his wife around the royal family. This is a particularly stressful time for King Charles and Princess Katherine as they're undergoing cancer treatment. They don't need any of the stress or the drama or the kind of tabloid fodder of having the couple around. And I'm sure Meghan feels similarly because she also didn't come for the Invictus Games 10th anniversary, which is something that many of us found quite surprising because she's made a point of supporting Harry in the Invictus Games at other events. Harry did have the company of the Spencer family, so the Earl of Spencer and Lady Jane Fellow, who did attend the event, but unfortunately no members of the royal family, other members of the royal family did, which is probably to his benefit.
And we know that Charles has claimed to have been too busy to see Harry, but we understand Harry may have made some additional demands for that meeting. Is that right?
Yeah, so apparently it's been rumored that he didn't want Queen Camilla to be present at his meeting with the king. He wanted a sort of a private audience. Again, this isn't showing someone acting in good faith. I think he can understand why there will be an acrimonious relationship between him and the queen. He did have not very many polite things to say about her in his book Spare. But what really all of this is indicating is that it's either Harry's way or the highway. And I think you can see that consistently with how the Sussexes have conducted themselves. Unfortunately for them, by being as vocal as they have been about their experiences in the royal family, they give the public a lot to criticize and a lot to scrutinize. I think they're realizing similarly the big mistake that Prince Andrew made, especially when you're making criticisms of people that have no right of reply. The royal family were never going to respond to any of the allegations that were made. They were never going to respond to the Oprah interview or the Netflix documentary, any of that. And by doing so, they've inevitably had the upper hand because we have never heard their side of the story and we never will. There have never been courtiers that have come forward to say or to talk about the conduct of the Sussexes at all. And that really works in the royal family's favor. So you can see how this adds to the frustration of Harry being unable to control the narrative, which is why he has made the point of constantly briefing the press when the royal family have stayed absolutely silent on anything to do with the Sussexes.
And as you said, Meghan didn't attend the Invictus event, but she did meet Harry in London before flying to Nigeria. Now, we discussed the likelihood of this last week on the show. Has there been any further reports on why the Sussexes chose that approach?
So there have been rumors that the PR team that they've now employed to kind of clean up Meghan's image in the UK advised her to not kind of make a showing of herself in the UK at the Invictus Games 10th anniversary. I did suspect that she would fly to the UK before flying to Nigeria because just logistically, it's just a common route. There are loads of flights from London and from Western Europe to Nigeria, as opposed to having a long haul flight from California to Nigeria, which is not possible at the moment. So I did know that I suspected that she would come to the UK, but I didn't think she was going to attend the Invictus Games anniversary, which she didn't. I do find it curious that they've employed a PR team. They're probably looking to go the same route as King Charles did with Queen Camilla back in 2006 after they got married, to try and clean up her image in the public. But one thing they don't understand is the royal family is very much dependent on public opinion, and public opinion only shifts once you've had skin in the game, once you've proven yourself, once you've engaged in public duty and public service for quite a significant amount of time. I mean, Queen Camilla's positive image in the eyes of the public didn't come overnight. She was basically the face of a hate campaign following King Charles's disillusion with his marriage with Princess Diana and her subsequent death. So that's something that the Sussexes don't really understand. You can't just, blame the public not liking Meghan on things like racism. She's had her say. She's had a lot to say. She's had the interview with Oprah and the Spotify podcast and her Netflix documentary. If after everything she said that she still doesn't endear herself to the public, then I think it's because actually the public don't like her or what she has to say, as opposed to it being for other reasons. So them employing a PR company is a bit strange, but it also shows the fixation on their public image. I think the penny is finally dropping that actually a lot of what they can do successfully is dependent on public opinion of them. And the South Park episode, for example, that mocked them really showed that they have fallen high from grace, basically.
Absolutely. Now, this trip to Nigeria, can you run us through it? What was on the itinerary and what's your take? Did it look like a non-royal tour to you?
It kind of bordered that. I think this is as far as they can go in kind of the faux royal tour. So they're invited by the Nigerian Defense Chief of Staff, which is the highest military role you can have in Nigeria. Nigeria has the largest military on the African continent and the highest conscription of females, which is about 30% of non-active personnel are women, which is quite remarkable. Now, we know that Nigeria sent delegates for the last Invictus Games, and the Nigerian Chief of Staff that invited them, Defense Chief of Staff that invited them, wanted to maybe broach the topic of Nigeria hosting Invictus Games in the future, but also to commemorate and to congratulate the couple on their work for actually really encouraging veterans to get back into the fold and using sport as a way to sort of get their lives back after unfortunately getting injured while on active service. They also had a few other engagements. Prince Harry talked about mental health. Meghan co-hosted a summit on women in leadership, which seems to be her shtick. And so, they had a few cultural engagements. They visited a school. Meghan also talks about the fact that she is 40% Nigerian, according to an ancestry thing that she did. She has 40% Nigerian heritage, and she made a point of saying that she sees herself in the children that she visited in the school. I do find, you know, kind of that to be an interesting fixation of particularly Black Americans. They come to like West Africa and do like a test and say, oh, I'm 60% Cameroonian or anything like that. And I can say this as someone who went to school in Ghana. We had a lot of people like this, and we just think, okay, but what else do you know about your country of heritage? And it's kind of like just a fun pastime. It's not really anything serious, but Meghan saw it as a way of connecting with obviously these children that she was there with. I suspect she might have had a bit more finesse had she still been in the royal family fold, to find connections in different ways. I mean, if you look at the late Queen's tours that she did around the world, she never said, oh, I'm a fifth Finnish or an eighth Russian or anything like that, like, you know, Elizabeth Warren tried to do in the US, saying she's like an eighth Native American. Those kinds of connections don't really land very well. It's more to do with kind of respect for the culture and how you find it fascinating and other points of connection. But this is kind of diplomacy a la Meghan. It's kind of a new brand of reaching out that the Sussexes are trying out, and they will make mistakes. But this trip seemed mainly to focus on the Invictus Games, and I think that the royal family breathed a sigh of relief because there was clearly no kind of crossover between their former lives as working royals and what they are trying to do now.
Absolutely. Excellent observations as always, Esther Krakue. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, before we go, Councillor Dale Anthony Grounds, the chairman of the Ashfield District Council, well, he dresses up as Spider-Man to visit sick kids in hospital, or as he refers to them, the real-life superheroes. This week, he met King Charles at the Buckingham Palace Garden Party, which honours everyday Britons for their service to the community. Anyway, he told the King he was Spider-Man. Here's the exchange.
Do you have to dress up as Spider-Man?
I've actually worn the
You're lucky here wearing a Spider-Man outfit.
And that's the show for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Up next is Newsnight. Good night, and we'll see you next week.